Do your current Mary stuff. I'll catch you up. You know, it takes me almost as long to get to your house.
Can you hear me okay here?
No.
Oh, I'll just do it this way, okay. Thank you all for coming. I'm John Foster, the president of the Parma Hilton Historical Society. And tonight's presentation is a joint effort between the Historical Society and the Hilton Alumni Association. So we're really honored to see you all here and to have Dan Vinton here to speak to us. We'll begin with a pledge to the flag. So I'll ask you all to please rise if you can. It's okay to stay seated if you'd rather. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Have a seat, thanks. This evening came together quickly with a lot of effort from Nan Laporte, the president of the Alumni Association, and Rob Dickerson from Life Quest Church, who's taken on the technology. So they're great contributors to the community, and we owe them a round of applause for the effort they put in tonight. I'm going to ask Nan to say a few words to you about the two organizations and introduce our speaker. So, Nan, would you please?
Thanks, John. 225 was the count we had at about 5 o'clock this afternoon. So, hence we needed a larger venue. So I'm glad you're here, and it's air conditioned, which is even better. The reason I get to do this is not only am I president of the Alumni Association, I'm secretary of the Historical Society. So, double duty here. The Historical Society and the Alumni Association are both nonprofits that are organized here in the Hilton community. The Historical Society is mainly about preserving and discovering our history of this Hilton Parma area, and then teaching and educating the community about it. If you haven't been to the museum up on Parma Corners Road, please stop by, because there's all kinds of fascinating things. Anybody remember the Candy Kitchen? Oh, well, go see it up there. The Alumni Association, which is only a year old, has a mission to connect alumni, educators, and the community to benefit today's student. And we do that through scholarships and classroom grants. That's our main focus. And this year we gave 4 scholarships and over $10,000 in grants. If you go out and look at the new mural, the Alumni Association was responsible for getting that done. So we've had a very busy first year. Both organizations are run by volunteers. Now I'd like to go around and take everybody's name down and say, choose one or both. But of course we're not going to do that. However, if you would like to volunteer for either, talk to John or I, or check out the websites. The other reason that we partnered, and we've partnered with several things, is that Dan Vinton is an alum, class of '83. And he was also part of a pretty historic event. So you cover both bases, Dan. And we're so glad to have Dan here tonight. When Dan graduated from Hilton, his career was as an auditor, and now he works for wealth management in TIAA. For some reason, he didn't stay in our fine little community. He lives in Charlotte, North Carolina with his wife, and he has 2 adult children, Kyle and Andrew. So we are really excited to have Dan. I'm going to stop talking. Dan, come on up. Oh, fasten your seatbelts. Dan, we're ready. Yes, right. Dan, we're ready to take off.
Cactus 1549, 700, landing 5,000.
Cactus 1549, request for the contact on maintain 15000.
Maintain 1 to 5,000, Cactus 1549.
Cactus 1549, turn left lane 270.
Cactus 1539, hit birds through false rest of it's returning back towards LaGuardia.
Okay, you need to return to LaGuardia. Turn left heading up 220.
220.
Sorry, departure's got emergency returning. It's 1529. He bird strike. He lost all engine. He lost the thrust in the engines. He's returning immediately.
Cactus 1529, which engines?
He lost thrust in both engines. He said.
Got it.
Cactus 1529. We can get it, Steve. You want to try to land runway 13?
We're unable. We made it to Hudson.
Hi, Cactus 1549. Could be less traffic to runway 31.
Unable.
Okay, what do you need to land? Do you want to try to go to Teterboro?
Yes.
Teterboro, Empire. Actually, LaGuardia departs got emergency inbound.
Hey, guys.
Cactus 1529 over the George Washington Bridge. Wants to go to the airport right now.
What's the airport? Check if you need assistance.
Yes, it was a bird strike. Can I get him in for runway 1?
Runway 1, that's good.
Cactus 1529, turn right 280. You can land runway 1 at Teterboro.
We can't do it.
Okay, which runway would you like at Teterboro?
We're going to be done.
I'm sorry, say again, Cactus? Cactus 1549, radar contact is lost. You also got Newark Airport up at 2 o'clock in about 7 miles. Eagle 54718, turn left thing 210.
210, 2718. I think he said he was going to the Hudson.
Cactus 1529, you saw him?
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having me, first of all. I'm extremely honored to be speaking in front of my hometown and the people that are here. I don't live in Hilton anymore, but Hilton is still in me, and Parma. So I'm very blessed to be here and talking about my experience. But before I talk about mine, I want to talk a little bit about that. The two voices that you heard, one of them obviously is Captain Sully. The second voice was Patrick Harton. He's the air traffic controller. And so I'm going to chat a little bit about his story, just a little bit tidbit of part of what he had to go through and what his responsibility was during his process. And you could see how quickly and how actively he was trying to help our plane land on a runway. He has really two jobs. I mean, more than that, he's two jobs. He has to land planes and he has to get them taken off. And in New York, imagine being an air traffic controller, what a lot of stress that is. And so the power belongs to the air traffic controller. Up until there's a problem with the plane, and then that power shifts, and now it belongs to the captain. And so he's asking what he needs, and Captain Sully's telling me what he needs. He's going to get up in the Hudson. We were in the Hudson, and he's still calling out. Newark's up 5 miles. He kept calling out. I mean, he did not want to believe he was going to end up in the Hudson River. And so finally, they had to take him out of the seat because it now turned into an investigation. And they put him in a conference room, and in his mind, he was responsible for 155 lives. And so his story is very unique. Patrick is a very good friend of ours. He's part of our group. It was actually about an hour or so after the count where they finally told him. So he kind of went through a lot of PTSD on that. They had, he'd not worked for a little while, going through all the process. But I just think it's very special on what he did in his attempts to try to help us through it. He did an amazing job. Unfortunately, there's nothing he could do. We ended up in the Hudson River. But starting into my story, I do need to kind of let you know that there's 150 other stories, okay? So there's 150 passengers and 5 crew, and actually 155 stories, I guess. So you're going to hear mine. I'll try to relay some of the events for other passengers and what they went through, but you really could hear 150 different speeches, all very, similar and not similar as far as mine's concerned. Back then, I was an auditor. I worked for my brother-in-law, Hungerford Vinton at the time, and it was a long trip. And I had a flight that was going out actually later. It was like, I think it was 5:30. And so I wasn't even supposed to be on this flight. So now anytime I go standby, I'm like, I don't know if that's a good idea. But The job I had was in New Jersey. I got done very early. I did know about this flight. I'm thinking, am I going to stand any chance of making it? I don't know, but I got out. I figured I'd take a chance. I'd go from New Jersey to LaGuardia. It's kind of like they open up the roadways for me, almost wanting me to get on that plane. I know that sounds a little corny, but I mean, normally the traffic to get from New Jersey to LaGuardia is awful. And it was in wintertime, but I got through, I got the car off, I got to the airport, I got one of the last tickets. I remember that gate agent was very happy for me, and I think about that poor fella, if we all had perished and he just gave me a ticket to my death, you know, but I'm excited, right? I'm going home, I'm gonna have dinner with my family. I get to the gate, and we board. I had a middle seat, so I was in row 15E, which is about 2 rows behind the exit, 25 rows in total, if you're familiar with an Airbus 320. So I finally get on board, I get comfortable, get situated. The flight was scheduled to go out at 2:45, but we never really left until 3:30, 45-minute delay. And part of the reason is that's when they just started charging for bags. Do you remember that, when they started charging for bags? And there was no process in place. It was a mess, and it's in the middle of winter. So I remember seeing bags going back, bags going to the front. I'm sitting there, I didn't really care so much because I was just happy to be on this flight, but we were delayed 45 minutes and then we finally took off at 3:30. Why is that important? Well, you saw it, all it is a plane going this way, right? And a flock of birds going this way. I mean, we had left on time. If we just left 5 minutes earlier or later, we wouldn't be here right now. It's just kind of amazing how fate, good or bad, puts us in situations, and I'm sure each and every one of you could think of a time when fate has pushed your lives positive or negative. And so it's obviously, it started negative, but it ended up being a super positive thing for me. So we take off, and pretty uneventful. Captain Sully made his announcement. I recall it was a very clear day, so it was going to be a nice day to fly. It was cold, though. It was about 10 degrees. That's cold. That's normal. That's not, in New York, that's more colder than normal. We take off, and about a minute into the flight is when the birds hit the plane. Now, we had no idea what that was. And people asked me, what was that like? And in some aspects, it was kind of toned down a bit, but it was absolutely the most violent, terrifying thing I've felt in my entire life. Picture your worst turbulence if you've all flown. And I think that's what also gravitates this story to people, because we all fly. You know, what's it like to be in this situation that I am? But picture your worst turbulence and multiply it by 1,000. It was freaking awful. And we're only like about 2,000 feet in the air. So normally when you hit turbulence, it's much more higher. So I was smart enough to know this isn't turbulence. It felt like a bomb went off. That's how violent it was. We had absolutely no idea what that was. The thing is like when you have turbulence, doesn't your pilot normally come on and say, hey, calm down, everything's good? Nothing for a whole minute, right? So we're getting a little mad with him, right? What's going on, Captain? Well, he's busy, okay? There was no instruction for him to give us because there was no instruction to give us. So he's busy with Jeff Skiles, co-pilot, trying to figure out what to do and where to go. And as you know, it ended up being the Hudson River. But for a whole minute, that was terrifying in itself because it was the fear of the unknown. I mean, I was just waiting for the plane to blow up. We could smell the smoke. Somebody's yelling, the engine's on fire. And it was just frightening. Almost, it was more scarier, I think, than when we finally got some instruction, which is not what we wanted to hear. But it was just awful. And so after a minute of that, you know, it was pretty calm. Some passengers were, you know, shaking. You can hear some sobbing. Some people were yelling out, hey, what's going on? But other than that, pretty subdued. And then finally, Captain Sully comes on. And he goes, this is your captain. And I was like, whew. All right, he's alive. That's a good start. All right. You know, all right, Captain, you know, you're forgiven. All right, take us back to LaGuardia. I mean, I know we're going to Charlotte. That was not happening. So take us back to LaGuardia, take us back to Newark, wherever. I don't care. Just take us back. We'll just start over and we'll just forget about the whole thing. And he goes, this is your captain. Brace for impact. That's it. And I'm like, those are 3 words I was not expecting. I mean, I was expecting anything but that. And we're in New York, and I had a middle seat. And what do you think you're going to brace into? You know, so I've got, sadly, visions of 9/11. And although some passengers claim that they felt like they have a good chance to survive that, I didn't. Most of us felt like that was the end. And so people ask, well, what's that like? You know. It's very interesting to go through an event like something like that, where about another minute and a half when he made that announcement and when we hit the water, your mind races tremendously. There is not a doubt that your life flashes before you, because it really does. But what does come to up front is basically my loved ones, my family, my friends. I no longer going to, hug my boys and kiss my wife. Anything I did in my life, who cares? I'm dead. It doesn't matter anymore. But it's the fact that I'm going to miss my family, and it's just very, very sad. I was scared, but it was more of like I had already committed myself that I was not going to live that day. And then I'm thinking, well, I'm going to be dead. And then I turned it around. It's like now my young sons at the time, 5th grade and 3rd grade, they got to grow up with telling people that his father died in a plane crash. I mean, that's just going to be tremendously emotional for them. And my wife, of course, I can't even imagine. Now, truth be told, about 2 months before this whole event, I had actually upped my life insurance policy. So I was pretty stoked about that decision. I'm not kidding. I mean, you think about how you're going to protect your family even though you're not going to be there. So I was like, okay, financially they'll do okay. And maybe my wife's like, no, this isn't so bad. No, I'm just kidding. You never say that in front of me. But it was just sad. And so in the interim, we're trying to brace. So, I mean, I'm going to say this right out. I did not listen to my flight attendants. I mean, I've flown tons of times, but, I've got my earbuds in, or I'm reading and so forth, and they're saying their things about what you need to do when there's an emergency, right? And yeah, exactly. So I'm going to just get on my soapbox and listen to your flight attendants, because their first responsibility is safety, and everything below that is it's just safety, all right? And so I didn't grab my, I think I lost track of what I was saying. We're still declining, yeah. So, but I am bracing, because that's what everybody else around me is doing. I've got my heads down, and for what their job was, they can't see. They have this little hole that they look out the window, and they just heard brace for impact as well. And what were they doing? Their job. You think they would be like, we're done, but no, they're yelling, brace, brace, heads down, brace, brace, heads down. Amazing how training ended up being a big part of all of our lives, all of us being alive that day, including the flight attendants, which we owe our lives to. So I'm bracing, getting ready. Now, I'm still going to look. I mean, if this is going to be the end, I don't want to. Who closes their eyes on a roller coaster? Not me. But we're getting closer and closer and down. And so the things going through my mind, I've said my goodbyes, I said my prayers. And literally, like the last 20 seconds, amazingly enough, I had a full, peaceful acceptance that went through my body, and I was ready to go. And I guess I never would have expected that. And if you've ever known anybody that's had maybe terminal illness and that, they're ready. I mean, when you've accepted it, and you've had time to accept it, that's the other thing too. That's what happened to me. And it's like, okay, I've lived my life as best as I can, and this is the end. And so that was kind of an amazing feeling. But luckily, that didn't happen. And so as you saw from the note there, the plane kind of came down. Sully had it at whatever degrees he had it to have it, so the plane wouldn't flip over. And we coast along the Hudson River. People ask, what was the landing like? And honestly, I've had worse landings on tarmacs than Hudson River. But all being fair, I'm bracing, right? I'm bracing for the worst, and I'm bracing from something so violent that I'm probably not going to live through it. Other times you sit there and you hit the tarmac hard, and it just freaks you out a little bit. But it also depended on where you sat on the plane too, because we were in the back first. My friends, my passenger friends in the back, much more violent. I was in the middle. So if you're ever going to get a first class seat, this really would have been a good one, as far as the landing is concerned. So we hit the Hudson River, we slide down the Hudson, the plane drops, turns to the side, and we stop. And that's just the most bizarre moment where I was not expecting to be alive, and I was. And I looked down and I literally did the pinch test. I'm like that. I felt that, and I, all my body parts were still there. That was pretty good. And then I hear the cabin door open up, and Captain Sully just yells, "Evacuate." Didn't have to say that more than twice, that's for sure. And you know, all honestly, I had come from work, and there's my computer bag right below, and I'm like, some important stuff is in there, and I'm like, for one split second, I'm like, maybe I'll take that. I'm like, I'm out of here. No way. I'm trying not to throw any curse words here, but there were a lot thrown. Anyway, so what happened is my seatmate takes off, and then I follow him, and this is where I'm getting to the point where I didn't listen to my flight attendants because I didn't grab a seat cushion or a life jacket. So I'm about to exit out of the plane, out the wings where you probably saw all the pictures, and I didn't have a seat cushion. And I'm thinking, oh my God, we're in water, what am I gonna do? I couldn't go back to my seat. It was pretty orderly as far as getting out. It's just you had to move with the flow. Luckily, there was a passenger spent his extra time handing out seat cushions in the front, and I thought that was pretty cool. I'm like, I got a seat cushion. I think the reason why I mentioned that is there was a lot of awesome things that we did as passengers to help each other as well. I mean, Captain Sully, as you know, did a fantastic job, and when that plane ends up in the Hudson, his job is done. There's nothing more he can do to help us. And now it's up to us to try to survive and work with the elements and so forth. And so now I got a seat cushion, I get out on the wing, and you know, wing's starting to load, people are starting to climb off, and it's, you know, it's not a boat, you know, we're sinking. And I just remember as people are climbing off, now walks up with his mother with her 6-month-old baby, and I'm like, wow, this is real. And so the slide that deploys when you land on the runway to get out of the plane, we use that as a raft. And so what I initially did, kind of dressed like this, maybe even more in a business suit, is I went to bring it over myself because we couldn't get on it. It was just a little bit too far away from the wing, and I grabbed it and I tugged it, and it didn't move. My feet slipped, and into the river I go. So again, it's about 35 degrees water temperature, and people are like, you know, hey, was that cold? And I go, duh. But the adrenaline in my body was just overwhelming that I truly did not feel it. I mean, I felt it later, but because this is such a surreal moment in my life, I just know I had to survive. I had to do what I had to do, and you just go into survival mode. So I swam back, like I got my seat cushion, I swam back to the wing. I couldn't get back up on the wing. It was too slippery, and you know, for a split second, I'm thinking I'm gonna be stuck here, and before I know it, 2 guys just plucked me out of the water, and back I am, and I don't even know who they are to this day. But obviously, I owe them great gratitude. So what we ended up doing is a bunch of us grabbed each other's waists like this, and so the guy at the very end of the wing could now bring in the slide. He was without worrying about falling off, so we worked together as a team, flipped it over, and then people started piling into the onto the slide raft. I ended up staying on the wing because that's when I first started to see the ferry boats come our way. And actually, let's start showing some pictures here. Okay, so this is the very first ferry boat that came by. Do you see, everybody see the ice coming down? Yeah, that shows how cold it was. You can see the gentleman in the white shirt, that's Vic Warnemont, and I'm right next to him. And what I like about this picture is we're standing on the wing. I like how our hands are like on each other's backs. I mean, it's kind of like that we wouldn't fall off the wing, because as we started going down, the plane was sinking like that. I couldn't see the wing anymore. I just had to hope I was still on it. Plus, we're in the Hudson River, and how disgusting is that, right? Yeah. So that's the first boat that came to rescue us, but the tide ended up taking that to the front and ended up rescuing others. Now, I'd like to mention the boat captain on that boat. His name is Vince Lombardi. That's his name. Now, he's probably the only New Jersey, New Yorker guy that's a Packer fan, right? You got a name like that. Why do I mention Vince? Well, if you all, who here saw the movie Sully? Okay. So, thank you, by the way. So, what Clint Eastwood did is Vince got to play himself in the movie. Isn't that cool? I remember we were watching the premiere, and I'm like, oh, there's Vince, you know, because again, we're all close. I mean, we got to know the first responders, and I thought that was really cool. The frogmen that came in later to jump in and help people, they were the same frogmen that helped rescue passengers as well. So this was the first boat. Go ahead and hit the next slide. This is just a shot of another passenger. By the way, these are pics from passengers with their own cell phones, so that's kind of cool. This was one of my friends in the front, and he just took these shots just to send to his wife to let her know that he's still alive. And what's happening here is I'm, again, the guy kind of leaning down like that, and what I'm doing there is I'm helping another passenger. He fell off the wing, and I brought him back on the wing. I mean, it was nothing, right? These are little things that we're doing for each other, but he saw me a month later, and he came up to me like I saved his life, you know, and I'm like, I just pulled you out of the water. But again, these are things that we all do to help each other. Go ahead. Next one. So you can see, that's the slide that passenger is holding on to. That's the first ferry boat that rescued, that came to us at first, and then he ended up rescuing in here. If you went over where Sully was on the other front end, on the left-hand side, and this was, that one's there. But you can see a lot of us congregated mostly on the wing. One quick thing I'll add is, as I was exiting the plane, I remember taking a peek in the back of the plane. Now, when we land, one thing your flight attendants did say is go to your nearest exit, right? Well, the exit in the back of the plane had already been submerged in the water. So their story, as they tried to get out, they couldn't, and they tried to move up. But as they tried to move up, other passengers were trying to go to the back, and there was a log jam. In the meantime, as great as Sully landed the plane, there was a gash around row 20 in the back of the plane where water was coming up in the back of the plane, and they couldn't move. And now they're, you know, it's getting scary for them in the back. And I remember taking a peek, and I was watching people climbing over the seats, and my friends told me in the back, and they finally started coming up to the front, water's up to here, and they're like, holy shit, I just survived a plane crash, now I'm going to drown to death. I don't know about you, but that's my worst fear. And so I mention that because when I saw that, I was saying to myself as I was exiting, I said, man, I don't know if I'm going to survive today, but I doubt we're all going to survive. I mean, there's just no way, you know, from what I was seeing. But anyway, yeah, so this is us on the wing. A lot of them ended up either going on the wing or maybe even all the way to the front, which is a probably better option than where we were on the wing. I'm in this photo, kind of a Where's Waldo moment. On the far right, I'm looking this way, and I have no reason, no why. I mean, I don't know why I'm looking that way. So, all right, so this is the boat that rescued us. As you can see in the far left corner, there's the baby. You all see that? Yeah, there he is. And now he's safely on the raft. But I stayed on the wing, and I'm the person in the red shirt. I'm next to my friend Vic, so we kind of got to know each other very well that day. And I'm still standing on the wing, and the water's up to here. So again, it shows how quickly we were sinking. To climb that, that was awful. Because once I grabbed onto it, that's when I felt the hypothermia. Because we were in the water 15, 20 minutes, and obviously, and I say this all the time, if these first responders showed up just 15 minutes later, I don't know if we all would have survived because of the hypothermia. I felt maybe myself, I was in pretty good shape to survive that, but I couldn't count on everybody. But when I started to climb that, I grabbed onto the rungs and I couldn't feel my hands. No feeling at all. And I don't know if you ever had hypothermia in your hands, they're useless. So if I recall, I think I used my arms to kind of climb up. My feet, I just kind of looked up or looked down, make sure I'm going up. And so when it was my turn, I knew I had to do it. I had to get up there so everybody could be rescued. And I ended up jumping over and landing into the boat. And that was the first moment when I really truly felt I was going to survive that day. So go ahead with the next picture. Okay, again, another shot of me. I'm still standing on the wing. I'm going, come on, Vic, move your tush, right? And then there's Lori behind me, and she's got her bag with her. How about that, right? So now listen, people ask that, and like our minds, when you're in a panic and so forth, everybody's minds react differently. Poor Lori brought her bag with her. And she couldn't climb that with the bag, and Chris right behind her takes the bag and chucks it in the Hudson River, right? The irony is we got our luggage back, so if she had left it on the plane, she would have gotten her bag. And she's like, yeah, again, you can't blame her for doing that. It's just your brain thinks whatever. So that's again, that's another shot there. So these shots are kind of neat to show somewhere of the aftermath. So we're on the boat now. That's where I came out, and this is only like about 15 minutes. That showed how quickly this was sinking, and like I said, this is really important that we got rescued. You can still see with some passengers that still need to be rescued on the other side. But that's the exit door that I got out right there. And so again, another shot of as we're going away. I ended up going on the New Jersey side. There's passengers that we were all scattered. New York, the Coast Guard came out. Most of us were on the ferry boats that go back and forth between Manhattan and New Jersey. This is just a lovely shot. This just shows everybody coming out to help us. I mean, this was a great picture that he took with his phone, and just, you've got all different groups coming out to our aid and our rescue. I'm going to say it again later, but I got to see the best in humanity that day. I got to see the best in people come to our aid and to our rescue, and I wish the whole world was on this flight with us to see that we can all be, as good as what I got to see that day. So this is a shot of the plane coming out of the river. Now, what people ask me is like, well, did the plane sink? I go, no, I think they were able to tie it up and then drag it to New Jersey. And then the photographer decided to go down. He knew about when they were going to pull it out, so he had a whole display. That was another cool thing I got to go see. But you can see one of the engines is still there, and one of them is not, right? So one of the engines was hit on impact and went off, and that's really supposed to happen. The engines are supposed to come off. But this one stayed intact. That was the side I went out on, and because of that, that's why that side was heavier, and I was in the water, and then my seatmate went out the other one. There's a picture of him, he's way out there, it looks like he's just checking his email with not a drop of water on it. I'm like, following him next time we get in a plane crash, I'm going to follow him, he knows where to go. So this was an interesting shot. A buddy of mine had the online New York Post, and there I am. Don't I look wonderful and happy, right? Why am I on a stretcher? Well, so when we got rescued, I was in the New Jersey Weehawken Ferry Terminal. There was quite a few of us in there. There was about 50, 60 of us. But we're all over the place, so they need to make a count. They want to count us out, and so they put this band around us. They had different levels of injuries. The bottom one was black that said dead, and I'm like, don't check that one off. But we waited there. And I mentioned earlier, I was happy to be alive, and we were this small chit chat. Another friend had me borrow a phone. They're all my friends. And so we're talking, but we're just waiting. We want to know the result of everybody. Wondering if we all survived this or not, and still wondering if this is even real. And then about 3 or 4 hours later, if you saw the movie Sully and the Tom Hanks Sully character when they gave him the 155 count and how utterly relieved he was, you can multiply it by 155. And got that news, I knew this was going to be special. I didn't expect it to be as grand as it is even to today, but I can't tell you how relieved we were. After that, and then a little bit more thing, then they said, okay, you can all go now. I'm like, what? But they tried to set some things up for us. Again, this is nothing that anybody's ever prepared, right? And they asked a bunch of us, do you want to go to the hospital? And I'm married to a nurse, and she'd freaking kill me if I didn't go to the hospital. So I said, I'll go to the hospital. And they go, all right, well, we're going to get into a stretcher. I'm like, well, I can walk. He goes, well, sir, you don't have any shoes. And it's true. My shoes were completely wet. I couldn't wear the shoes. And they're like, because you don't have any shoes, you got to go on a stretcher. And I'm like, oh, no.